Well, hey there, my beautiful friends. Again, I am so grateful that you're here. I know I say that a lot. I truly am. I started this podcast, gosh, a while back and have continued it because at first it was a platform that let me just share my stories. It just was a small little podcast that I got to share life, some of the amazing experiences that I had in life, a lot of the amazing lessons that I had in life. And I just started out with that. But then it grew and it grew into a place of deepening. And I got through a series that I did of the 10 hardest things that I had done in my lifetime, which was hard. It was hard to narrow down what would be like the 10 hardest things I had done or been through. But what was harder than narrowing it down to those 10 was actually telling those 10 stories over, week upon week. Forget what episode numbers they are, but you can go back and listen to them. They're powerful. They're riveting because one of the things that happens in life is when we look backward, which is how we gain our wisdom. So the older we get, the more wise we get because we start to see the perfection of it all. And sometimes people will get stuck asking like, why me? Or why did I have to go through that? Or why did that have to happen? Or what good did all that suffering bring about? And the truth is, it's up to us to find the good in all that life dishes out. And that was what that series was about. And I loved doing it. And I was really happy when it was over. And I then sat down with my team and I was like, now what? Now what do I talk about? Because I've kind of covered it all. At least I thought I had. I'm sure I could find some more things in the nooks and crannies of my life to talk about, but I kind of covered the big ones. And so it took me some time to kind of regroup around what's next. And around the first of the year of 2026, I don't know what year it is or what month it is when you're listening to this, but at the first of this last year, I always have a word of the year. It's a thing I've done my whole life. It's a word that frames the way that I look at life each year. It frames the way that I experience life. This year, the word found me, and it was sovereignty. And I tried to push it away. I tried my best to say it's hard to spell, it's hard to say. I don't know, what it is. And I decided that I needed to. My soul, our soul, will tell us when we need to lean in and when we don't need to lean in to something. If we are present enough to listen. And I would say in 2025, one of the things that I call it master classes of life. And I'm in this school of spiritual psychology and trauma coaching. And that led to many, many of my deepening awareness and my spiritual path. And it led to so many good things, but it also had me looking at my sovereignty. So it made sense that that was my word for 2026, which led me to a series of podcasts rooted in sovereignty. So I started doing research on myself, for myself. And what is it? And where's it begin? And where are the places for me that I lose my own sense of sovereignty and my own self? Where do I abandon my priorities or my values? And so the class that I was taking was leading me right here to share with you some of what I learned about my relationship to my own sovereignty. If you haven't listened to the other two episodes, this is episode 3. I have broken it down into 12 sections of things to talk about. Believe it or not, that is how layered our sovereignty can be. It can show up in so many different ways that I wanted to cover them And this is really about my journey. It might bring something up in yours. I think, regardless whether you attach it to your sovereignty or not, what it brought up for me will relate to you. If you're here, welcome. I am glad you're here. I am grateful that you're here listening to me. And I hope that you take this to heart as I did. And really, in between these episodes, integrate what it is that we talk about into your being, into your breath, into your lens of which you look through life with, and recognize that there is an observer that lives within you that's watching you and seeing how we operate. It's our spirit, it's our soul. I'm not sure which one. It's a life force energy that lives inside of us that pays attention to what we're doing and goes, well, we get to experience that. It's like kind of like taking your BFF on the roller coaster ride of life and saying, come on, observer, we're going to do this thing called life and buckle up, baby. We're going for a ride. And it's like, okay, I'm along for the ride. And I want you to think about that, because getting in touch with that, if you want to read a book about that, I first learned about the observer through reading the books of Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle wrote The New Earth, but also The Power of Now. And he taught me, as I read those books many, many, many years ago, about the observer within. And it's actually a very different feeling when you realize that there is this observer thing going on. Well, as we go through this series on sovereignty, I'm going to be, drawing on that observer in you to see. I want you to kind of ask yourself, how do I do that? What's my version of this? Because, gosh, the depth and the layers that unfold are remarkable. These are life-changing conversations, in my opinion, in my humble opinion. So I'm glad you're here. I would like us to start. Whether you are laying in bed listening to this, try not to fall asleep. I will try not to bore you. Or you're driving along, or you're doing whatever it is that you're doing. I think pretty much anywhere you are, you can stop and pause. And I would like you just to take a big, deep cleansing breath in through your nose. And I want it to be long and slow, pushing your lungs into your rib cage, expanding that diaphragm, holding it at the top, like up, like you can't get any more taller because you've got so much breath inside, and then slowly exhale through the mouth, pushing your belly to your backbone till there's no more air to squeeze out, and then take a nice breath. That right there is one of the biggest, most powerful reset tools you could ever need in life. Doing that breath that we just did, breathing into a count of 6, a slow count of 6, and exhaling to a slow count of 8, holding for just a minute at the top and at the bottom, gives you a reset of the nervous system. Okay. And I believe that the nervous system is a big component on unlocking our path to our sovereignty. So the breath is important in this. And with each episode, we'll begin by just pausing long enough to take a focused, intentional, cleansing breath. Okay? So if you find yourself going into a meeting and you're nervous, or you're leading your first Zoom call and you're not sure what you're doing, or you have to have a difficult conversation with someone, do 3 of those cleansing, big, deep breaths. Reset your nervous system. It'll totally change the outcome, because it'll totally change your energy that you bring to whatever it is that you're looking at. Okay, so speaking of that, pause, right? We're pausing. How well do you slow down? Because in the pause of life, there's this peaceful theory. It's like, it sounds peaceful to say, let's just slow down. Let's pause for a moment. let's just sit in the stillness of this moment. But in reality, it can feel deeply uncomfortable. I have a client that I work with. I love her. And if you're listening, you know it's you. Yep. Who cannot get comfortable in her stillness. It's almost like she's doing it wrong because she can't be comfortable being still, getting quiet. And she's like, immediately, all the voices are popping up in her head. Immediately, her anxiety increases, it doesn't slow down. She feels like she should be doing something all the time, fixing something, producing something, working harder, moving faster. And the truth is that it should feel uncomfortable to sit in the stillness if it's teaching us that we need to work on this. Okay, I'm going to say that again. If you feel uncomfortable in stillness, in pause, in quiet, in the rest, then it's helping you. That's your body saying, something's wrong here because I should be feeling good in this and I'm not feeling good in this, right? And so in today's conversation, it's going to be focused on something that I just don't think we talk about this enough, especially in the world of my field, which is personal growth, transformation, healing, success. All of that requires us thinking, feeling, processing, journaling, meditating, doing. There's a lot, right? We we talk about the hustle. We talk about busyness. We talk about slowing down. We talk about who we're becoming as if we're not already enough, but we don't talk enough about rest. And not just rest, but rest without guilt. Now, there's a concept. I remember feeling the need to rest and knowing that I would feel guilty if I just rested when there was laundry to do or dinner to prepare or work to be done. So, this episode is really about finding your sovereignty in a place that most people overlook because it's the one thing where you can take your power back. It's the one thing that you can do. I mean, you can take your power back in your relationship in a power struggle or in using your voice. You can take your power back through the choices that you make. But can you take your power back when you believe that your worth is tied to how much you do? Can you sit still without trying to earn your existence? Because that's where this stuff gets real. I want you to think about that. Are you busy trying to earn your right to exist by doing more? Are you trying to justify your value, your worth by how much you do? Because if so, rest is not going to feel comfortable. So let's start right there. Because if slowing down feels uncomfortable to you, then that's awareness. So we'll be grateful. I want you to, everything starts with awareness, right? When you become aware that you're uncomfortable slowing down or resting or sitting still, when you get uncomfortable, even resting and thinking, I slow down, I find my inner peace during yoga class. Well, what are we doing? We went to yoga class to justify slowing down. It's we do things to justify slowing down or resting. And it's not just resting our body. We need to rest our nervous system. We need to rest our mind. We're so conditioned from early childhood on to associate rest with laziness, lack of ambition, falling behind, or even failure. And we're also taught that productivity, that's our identity. That's where we get our value from. It's a proof to the world that we matter. Then that becomes our safety. It's messed up, you guys. I discovered this about myself in my exploration and preparation for this podcast. To be honest, it had been shown to me year before last, and I got the lesson of it year before last, but I never really brought it full circle into my being, into my every breath. So recognizing that when we slow down, it's not like our nervous system goes, finally, she is slowing down. It goes, what are we doing? My gosh, are we okay? This is foreign. There must be something wrong. The other shoe is about to drop, because we don't ever. Stillness removes the distractions. And when the distraction is gone, whatever is underneath it rises up. You've heard me tell this story, and one of the 10 hardest things that I have been through about late 2020, let me think, November of 2024, I was busy, believe it or not. I was busy managing, helping, supporting my grandchildren going through stuff. I was busy cleaning up our garage because we were moving our office to a home office and had to have a place to store things until we could sort them all out. I was busy cleaning the storage room so that we could put the stuff that was in the garage in the storage room so the garage could hold all the billion things we had to bring in that we thought we needed from our office, where I stayed busy, and a home that I stayed busy in. Busy was like my name that whole year. And it got to the end of 2024, and I was fried. I literally was fried. And I said out loud, I need a break. I just need a break. Like, I couldn't put out all the fires that were lit around me. And all I wanted was to finish cleaning up the garage. My niece and I worked without end. We were so close. I was putting the last bin up on a very high up shelf in our garage. I had put a leaning ladder up to that shelf, and I climbed to the very top and reached over my head with this bin to put it on the top shelf when that ladder lost its foothold and began to slide. And down we both went. To this day, I cannot even begin to tell you, because in my mind, it made no sense how my heel of my right foot was the first impact on the way down, but it was. I don't know how that happened when I was on the top rung of the ladder, but I fell, and my heel took the 8-foot decline and crushed my heel, as you heard in an episode not too long ago. But what I want to tell you is that during the next 4 months after the surgery of that fall, or actually after the fall itself, the surgery was 10 days later, I had to lay still. I could not put my foot down. I couldn't put weight on it. Very limited to what I was able to do. And I was also on a lot of pretty heavy pain medicine. So I was too drowsy to be productive. I couldn't work on my computer. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't think. I couldn't write. I couldn't journal. I tried to read magazines. I tried, but I found myself unable to distract myself by feeling like I was making good use of that time. Have you ever had something like that stop you in your tracks where you had to recover, whether it was surgery or just life in general, where you had to be still and be still and know? What thoughts came up for you? For me, it was, I feel like I should be doing something. My body, on the other hand, was saying, I am so relieved. We finally got a break, literally. I was finally sitting still. I was finally resting. I didn't have to feel guilt because it was necessary. I was still doing something. It was called healing, recovery. My body was so grateful. My spirit was very grateful. My mind had to get retrained. And with the help of medicine, it learned to turn off and to just be, not going 90 miles an hour. It took something that drastic for me to rest without guilt, which led me to another addiction. Last episode, we talked about our society's addiction to urgency, and my specific addiction to making things urgent so that I could feel important and needed. But this episode is the addiction to doing, having to do. We don't stay busy because we have things to do. We stay busy because doing is a way for us to avoid something, right? So in your doing this, what are you avoiding? What are the things that you avoid? Sometimes for me, it's feelings that I haven't yet processed, questions that I didn't want to have to answer, truths I wasn't ready to face. So my busyness, it felt productive, but sometimes it was just being protective. And here's a deeper truth. When you start doing a lot, you create a false identity built on that doing. And once you've done that, rest feels like a threat. Because if you're not doing, producing, then who are you? Think of a time in your life, and it might be right now, where you were constantly doing things, constantly jumping to help, jumping to fix, busy creating, managing. What might you have been or what might you be avoiding if you're being totally honest right now? What are you avoiding? Are you feeling like your worth depends on it? Are you feeling like if you weren't that, who would you be? In one of the trainings I do called Holy Holes, I love it so much. I need to find a way to put that out in the world. But in that training, there's a question at the heart of the whole entire training. Who are you? Who am I if I'm not the role I play in life? If I'm not what I do? If I'm not my wounds? If I'm not my stories? If I'm not who the world thinks I am? If I'm not who my children think I am, or my family, or my friends, who am I? It's one of the most powerful questions you could ever ask yourself or someone else. Tell me who you are. Well, for me, that time in my life where I hit the peak of doing was 2023, not that long ago. And you all, I raised 5 children. So I was a doing machine. I was doing kids, childcare. I was doing potty training. I was doing homework. I was doing science fair projects. I was doing Cub Scout den mother things. I was doing gymnastic things. I was doing carpool lines. I was doing volunteer work. I was a doer. But 2023, I had no more kids left to take care of, to keep me busy at home. They'd all grown and left. I had no more caregiving to do with our parents. I could pour myself into our family business as the business admin, but it was the one thing that I did that I really, really didn't like to do. And it was part of my responsibility, but I didn't really like it. So I didn't do it all the time. Instead, I created urgency. I think I created reasons why I couldn't do more of that job because it wasn't my favorite job. was a lot of administrative stuff, and I'm a highly creative person, and it didn't have any room for creativity. So, what was I doing? Well, I'll tell you. I began this podcast. I rebranded my coaching business. I rebuilt the website. Well, I worked with people who rebuilt the website. Technology and I are not friends. I should say that we are friends, but it's also something I'm not naturally gifted at. I developed a health and a wellness and healing energy healing course. I taught the course for 12 months and supplemented it every month with products that I would actually make, like essential oil roll ons for each of our chakras, candles with herbs and crystals in them. So they were beautiful and relaxing, some sort of relaxing herbal salt blend to use in a nice hot bath, something else that was fun at first in my life, but man, did it create urgency. It ended up, I kind of created a monster doing that class, but I had fun. I had fun and it was powerful. It was powerful information. I launched courses. I wrote courses. I taught the courses. And basically, by the end of 2023, I had burnt myself out completely. By the beginning of 2024, my immune system began to fail. My energy was depleted. And shockingly, I didn't know why. Didn't know why. I was always sick. I had sinus infections that wouldn't clear. Strep throat was picking up every virus that was going around. And I was exhausted before my day really ever began. So almost everything in my life just had to stop. There really wasn't any mystery to it, except why was I doing so much? Well, I looked at that recently, and that was around the time that my son had become estranged with his new wife. My other son was planning to get married. I got to be the wedding coordinator for it, so I added that to what I did in 2023. Yes, and it was such a great wedding and such a great weekend. I loved doing it. I loved everything I was doing, right? And that justified it. I was doing so many things all at once. And when people would say, "Why are you doing that?" Because I love it. I love it so much. It brought me so much joy. Why did I need so much joy? I needed shovelfuls of joy because I had shovelfuls of sorrow. Yeah. Yeah. My friends were scratching their heads, going, "What in the world is she doing? She's gone bonkers." In my last episode, I shared a story of something my mom shared with me when we were taking a walk around a lake years and years ago. And she's like, "See these ducks, And I was like, "They're so peaceful and they're just floating along, kind of gliding across the water." And she said, "You're a lot like that. You seem so happy and peaceful on the outside, but behind the scenes, you're paddling in life like crazy." And she was right. And that was not in 2023. In 2023, I was paddling like a maniac. I was paddling like my life depended on it because it felt like it did. Because you know what? If I wasn't frantically paddling like my life depended on it, I would have to feel way too much. I'd have to feel too much grief, too much fear, too much sorrow, too much fear of abandonment if I didn't make myself useful, too much fear of rejection if I didn't find something to do that was good enough, too much emotion that had been stuffed away for too many guilt, too much. So let's talk about guilt, because this is the part that actually keeps us stuck. You finally sit down, you maybe take a break once in a blue moon. Maybe you even plan for a rest. And then what happens? What's the first thing that happens? It's that voice. For me, it's that voice or many voices saying, "You should be doing something right now. You're just sitting here wasting time." Other people are working hard. Why aren't you? You don't deserve to rest. What's the matter with you? Are you sick? And I want to tell you that voice was so loud in my head that I didn't hear it for most of the time. I didn't even hear it. I was so used to it being there that I was tone deaf to it. But that voice is not our truth. That voice is conditioning. And guilt is often just a learned response to breaking old patterns. Think about a moment where you tried to rest, but you couldn't fully relax because of guilt. Now, for some of you, it might be during one of the sound healings that Bob and I do. Maybe if you've been blessed to be in our sound healings, people have reported it was hard for me to sit still. It was hard for me to turn my brain off. What is that voice that you're tone deaf to saying? When you meditate, do you meditate with guided meditation, and can you stay with it? Do you meditate to a tone that just constantly plays and you just follow it through the meditation? Can you make it through it? How long can you be in a state of rest, stillness, silence before the voice takes command? What did that voice actually say to you specifically? For me, I tried to remember growing up if I knew how to rest, and I did. And I think it's one of the many reasons that I look at my childhood so warmly and remember it so affectionately. And it's because I would go and spend so long just laying down on the grass. I had a collie named Lady, and she would go with me, and I would lay my head on her, and I would feel her breathing, usually panting, and I would lay my head on her, and the sunlight would warm her coat to where it was like a warm pillow, and I would watch the clouds float by, and sometimes I would imagine what the shape was, and what if the clouds were God's voice and those shapes were telling me a message? And I would read the messages and then I would just get lost in the moment. And to me, that was rest. Yes, my mind was still active. I don't think I've ever mastered rest and silence and stillness to the point that my mind stopped. But I followed my mind instead of my mind chasing to-do lists or jumping to attention. It was a very different relaxing that I would do as a child. Sometimes it was wandering through our fields and just noticing nature. But if I wasn't outside and I was inside, I don't think I knew how to rest because I never saw my mom rest. She never sat still. And I remembered thinking I could never imagine walking in the door and seeing my mom stretched out on the sofa, on the couch in our family room, sitting in front of the fire, reading a magazine or eating bonbons. I could never imagine her just sitting down at the table, whether it was breakfast, lunch, or dinner, without jumping up to get refills or serve more food or do the dishes. She had a saying, and I wish I had her here to say, Mom, what was that? Because I cannot recall it as I was preparing for this podcast. She used to say, busy hands make thing. If you know, please comment, email me, tell me what that saying is. ChatGPT, when I asked it, said there is a saying that says, idle hands are the devil's workshop. I don't remember that, but I do think that maybe my mom had heard that because if she sat and her hands weren't busy, it was not okay. So she might sit on the porch swing, but she was stringing green beans or cutting up peaches to make jam, or she was baking a cake, or she was taking a cake and sitting with someone, or she was holding the hand of someone sick. My mom's hands were never idle. Even to the last days of her life, she was knitting prayer shawls when she couldn't do much more. So keeping busy was programmed. It's in our DNA to be busy. Maybe because someone in our ancestral heritage and back there just knew that if their hands stopped, the devil went to work. So that's a scary enough thought to keep hands busy. But to me, a busy nervous system is a recipe for disaster because rest is not a luxury. It's a biological necessity. Your body was never designed to stay in a constant state of alert. Yes, our nervous system's job is to scan for danger. Are we okay? Are we okay? We're okay. When we tell it, when that observer says, nervous system, we're okay here. Everything is okay. It's okay to rest. Then we get into our theta state, or we get into the wavelengths that brain waves that slow to a pace where restorative things happen in our body. It creates a rhythm to life. For every inhale, we have an exhale. We don't think about that. For every time we do a strenuous activity, there's a period of recovery. With expansion is integration. But most people are living in a constant state of go mode. Go, go, go. And eventually the body forces us to rest through burnout, through illness, through accidents like falling down from a ladder. Sometimes it's an emotional shutdown or exhaustion that no amount of sleep can fix. Now, rest is not weakness, it's regulation. So let's connect some dots here because this just doesn't exist in isolation. If you listen to episode 2, we talked about urgency, and you've heard me reference it on this podcast. It's that internal pressure that says, hurry up, don't miss out. Might have fear of missing out, FOMO. Got to do it now. You got to fix it before something goes wrong. Urgency doesn't always show up loud. Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it's just reaching for your phone every few minutes, filling every open space you have with something, even something you love. It's saying yes before you check in with yourself. It's moving to the next thing before you're finishing the one you're in. And here's the connection, because if you're living in urgency, rest will feel almost impossible. Urgency and rest cannot coexist in the same nervous system. One says go, the other says be. And what I've come to see in my own life and in the lives of the people that I work with is that urgency often becomes the lifestyle, not because we choose it consciously, but because we've trained our bodies to live there. And so even when there's nothing urgent happening, we can feel like there is. We can feel it watching a basketball game on TV. Like there's an urgency, like we get anxious. You hear of people yelling at their TV or screaming at the referee. So think of a time when nothing was actually wrong, but you felt like something was. What did you do in response to that? What happens in those white spaces of your day? Are you on your phone? Can you sit down to a cup of coffee by yourself in a coffee shop and not start a conversation with someone sitting next to you, or not have a book and not pick up your phone, but just simply be present to the taste of the coffee, to your enjoyment of it, to what other people are doing? Often I look and see how many people are on their phone. Sometimes it's riding on public transportation, or it's just sitting in a public place or waiting. We were walking to our seat on the airplane the other day, and walking through and past first class, and every person was on their phone. I was making eye contact, wanting to smile, to connect. No one looked up. Few people were not head down, face in phone. When was there a time that nothing was actually wrong and you felt like there's something was wrong? And what did you do to fill the space? Did you create urgency? Did you just notice what others do in that space? Did you try to fix it? I did when I tried to connect. I was trying to do something. I just need to connect to somebody instead of just observe. When you live in urgency long enough, your body forgets what calm feels like. So when you finally do slow down, it doesn't feel peaceful. It feels very unfamiliar. And sometimes unfamiliar can feel unsafe. And this is the part that really matters, because many people think that they need to learn how to rest. But what they actually need is to unlearn urgency. Because if you don't, you'll sit down to rest, but your mind is still running. Your body will still be bracing for impact. And you call that, I'm just bad at resting. I'm just bad at meditating. I'm just bad at sitting still. No, you're just still living in urgency. Urgency often comes from a belief that something is at risk. Your worth, your success, your relationships, or your security. Maybe you know something else that I didn't say that feels at risk. Tell me, what is at risk? So you keep moving to stay ahead of something that may not even be there. This is where sovereignty is going to ask you something different. It's going to ask you, can you choose stillness even when your body is telling you to move? Can you pause without needing to justify it? Can you trust that nothing is falling apart in this particular moment? Because the truth is, if you don't learn to step out of urgency, you're never going to feel at home when you rest. This is your sovereignty. Because choosing to rest in a world that rewards us for exhaustion, well, that's a radical act of self-trust, if there ever was one. Because it's saying, I'm not here. I'm not here to prove my worth to you or anyone or myself. I'm not here to run myself into the ground. I trust that I'm enough, even when I'm not producing anything. That is sovereignty. Not just what you do, but in how you allow yourself to be. Is there a moment where you chose rest even when it felt uncomfortable? Not because you were forced to rest, because you chose it. And then what shifted for you? I remember this last year, after I could start walking and putting weight on my foot, and it was in spring of 2025, not 2026. And I went through that year of recovery, and I'm still healing from that injury, believe it or not, but I am in a much better place than I was a year ago. I didn't need to sit down and rest. I didn't have an excuse, because I now could either put on the boot and walk, or I could put on my shoe, which was a little scarier. And if my foot was swollen, that was not going to work. But when I did, it seemed like I perceived the expectation of those around me to be, she's back on her feet, back to busy again, like let's all get back to doing what we used to do. And I still needed a lot of rest. I still needed a nap every afternoon. For the next 6 months, I still was exhausted. I still needed to rest my nervous system. I needed to rest my foot and elevate it. I needed to rest my mind. I recognized it, you guys. And I chose rest even when it felt uncomfortable. And to this day, I still do. but I have to still push away the guilt, especially when you have a husband who is busy doing all the time. Nothing makes him happier than when he gets to do stuff for me, believe it or not. So I can be resting and realize that I left my water bottle downstairs. And I'll go, and he'll say, "What?" And I left my water bottle downstairs and I'm getting up to go get it. And he'll say, "You rest. I'll go get it." And I would never go, "No, yeah." I would never just say, "Oh, okay," and put my foot up and let him go get it till now because he loves doing that. And I need to rest. I needed the rest. I did. But I also chose it. I'm choosing to let myself rest and be cared for. I'm choosing to let someone take care of me after decades of taking care of everybody else. I loved being able to let other people rest while I was able to take care of them. But I was not comfortable letting people do that for me. I was not a gracious receiver when that accident happened. I had to do a lot of inner work to heal the part of me that didn't feel worthy. Deserving, yes, I had a broken foot, but worthy? I had to ask for very little. To ask for the things I needed, help to get to the bathroom, help taking a shower, help getting dressed to go to a doctor's appointment, help getting back up the stairs, help getting back in bed. Those were all necessary things. But just help bringing me a Reese cup because I was craving chocolate, well, that felt unnecessary. What shifted for me was learning that I could ask. I could ask for help while I rested. Let's make this practical because I don't want this to just be something you agree with me on. I want it to be something that you start to experience. So we're going to start small, not a taking a whole week off to rest or not a huge life overhaul, just moments like sit without your phone for 5 minutes or take a walk without listening to anything. Close your eyes and take 3 deep breaths a few times a day. Notice what comes up. Maybe sit down on the couch, do nothing, close your eyes. And people say, "What are you doing? What are you doing, Mom? What are you doing, honey?" I'm resting. What shows up? Notice it. Not so you can fix it, but so you witness it. Observe it. What shows up? Do you hear the voice? Do you hear someone saying you don't have permission? Do you hear some voice in your head whispering, finally, you're giving yourself rest. Rest doesn't have to mean doing nothing. It can look like creating without the pressure to create. It can look like being in nature, sitting with a cup of coffee and no agenda, going out to eat lunch without inviting a friend along, just for the pure enjoyment of eating lunch in a restaurant with yourself. It can look like allowing space in between all the things that you're doing. Observe the guilt without obeying it. If guilt is leading the way, pause, take a breath, say no. We're not doing this out of guilt. Because you know what? Guilt is associated with obligation. If I'm doing it out of guilt, it means for some reason I'm obligated to do this, and then that ends up driving resentment. It's such a low toxic emotion to hold inside. Anchor yourself into truth. You are enough. You're not falling behind. You're not falling apart. You're not wasting anybody or your own time. You are sitting in the divinity of time, the divine perfection of time. Even the point that you didn't know this or that I didn't realize this until I did my research on sovereignty, I can look at that and say the timing was divine. It was perfect. I don't guilt myself like, why didn't you wake up 40 years ago and realize this? Why did it take you so long, Johnny, to finally figure it out that you were killing yourself? softly, sometimes harshly. It was all divine. There's no guilt. Pause, anchor into truth. Before we close today, I just want to open a little door and a peek into what's next, because rest is just one piece of this. Letting go of urgency is another piece of this. But when you begin to slow down, when you start creating that space in your life, when you stop filling every single moment with something meaningful or purposeful, something else begins to happen. You begin to hear things that you couldn't hear before. You begin to feel things you've been trying to move past. You begin to notice, and you actually begin to see what's true for you. Sometimes those emotions that pop up need help. You need help processing. You don't want to stuff them back down. You certainly don't want to ricochet back to the busyness. For a lot of people, this is where it just gets too uncomfortable and they abandon themselves over and over and over. It's like a epidemic. It's like a pandemic of self-abandonment, to lose our sovereignty because we aren't willing to bear the discomfort of what shows up moment to moment when we are still, when we sit still, when we quit overbooking ourselves, when we keep dragging our families all over the place because life is short and we've got to soak it all up. It's not rest itself, but what the rest is revealing that makes us uncomfortable, because when the noise quiets, you're left with your thoughts, your patterns, your desires, and your truth. And not all of it is easy to look at first. Sometimes it might ask you to change. It might ask you to let go. It might ask you to break the habit of being you. Some of it asks you to be honest in ways that you haven't been with yourself. So in our next episode, well, we're going to go there. We're going to talk about what comes up when you finally slow down. We're going to talk about those thoughts, the emotions, the discomfort, the clarity, because rest isn't the end of the work. It's actually just the doorway. And what's on the other side is where really our true transformation begins, which is a journey. So for now, observe it, notice it. Where are you still living in urgency? Where are you resisting rest? Where does guilt show up? With no judgment, staying completely neutral, just observing it, you will be amazed at what you learn in those quiet little crevices of stillness. Thank you for being here with me today. And as always, be well, sending you so much love. Take care.